My name is Maya. I was 24 years old, and the last thing my mother said to me before I walked across that graduation stage was, "Try not to embarrass us more than you already have." She wasn't looking at me. She said it the way you'd remind someone to wipe their feet. Reflex, routine, nothing remarkable about it. There were 9,200 people in that stadium. There was a governor in the third row. There was a banner with my name on it hanging from the rafters of a building I had spent 6 years earning the right to walk through. And my mother was checking her reflection and telling me not to embarrass her. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, because I had never told her, was that in approximately 42 minutes, the most powerful person in that room was going to say my name first, before the dean, before the honor roll, before the student speaker who had practiced for weeks. He was going to say my name, and then he was going to shake my hand, and then a photographer was going to capture the moment, and it was going to appear in a university press release the following morning. And in the slim black portfolio case I was carrying in my graduation bag, there was a printed packet that was about to end 11 years of a very specific kind of quiet. Welcome back. If you've ever been the person in your family who showed up without being asked, fixed things without being thanked, and still got introduced to strangers as the one who's still figuring things out, this one is specifically for you. Stay with me. Drop a comment and tell me if any of this sounds like your family. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time, because this story goes places I couldn't have predicted when I started documenting it. I want to tell you about the 42 minutes before I walked onto that stage, because that's where it starts. I did not cry in the bathroom. I did not call a friend. I did not stand in a stall and breathe through the thing my mother had just said to me. I had been given that specific sentence or variations of it enough times, over enough years, that my nervous system had developed something like an immune response to it. I felt it land. I noted it. I filed it. And then I walked back to the staging area and I began solving the actual problem in front of me, which was, I had 42 minutes and I needed to be ready. At 38 minutes out, I returned to the graduate staging area. I did not go back to my family's reserved seats in Section C, Row 14. I had moved my own seat assignment 6 days prior, at a window in the registrar's office, and told the woman behind the desk I had a family seating conflict. She had not asked for details. I had not offered any. At 31 minutes, I opened a notes app draft on my phone, a list I had been adding to for 14 months. The title was, "Things That Are Actually True." I read it once, the way you might check a level before hanging something important. Then, I closed it. At 22 minutes, I found Dr. Annabella Ferreira, near the faculty entrance. She is my program advisor. She has been my program advisor for 4 years. She is a small woman with very good posture, and the specific kind of stillness that belongs to people who have been in many rooms with many difficult people, and have learned that stillness is its own kind of authority. She squeezed my elbow and said, "They're going to call your name twice." I asked why. She said, "You'll see." I had learned to believe Dr. Ferreira. At 14 minutes my phone buzzed. It was my brother Caleb. The text said, "Mom's crying. You made her cry again." I photographed the screen. I added it to a folder on my phone I had labeled Family Archive. At that moment, the folder contained 312 items, screenshots, voice memos, 4 PDFs. I had been building it for 2 years and 3 months. I had not known exactly when I would need it. I had just known that eventually I would. At 9 minutes I checked the folder count one more time. Still, 312. I put my phone in my pocket. The student ahead of me in line asked if I was nervous. I said no. She laughed, like she thought I was joking. I wasn't joking. Here's what people misread about the way I responded in those 42 minutes. They mistake it for coldness, for disconnection, for someone who has been through so much they simply stopped feeling. That isn't it. I feel everything. I just learned very young that in my family, emotions were currency and whoever displayed them first, lost. So I had spent the better part of 2 decades learning to process things in private and act in public. Not because I was strategic by nature, because I had been trained to be, by people who used my tenderness against me every single time I showed it. I did not cry. I solved the problem. And the reason I want you to understand the difference is that it matters for everything that comes after. There is one more thing from those 42 minutes that I keep coming back to. Standing in line at my own graduation, I realized that not a single person in my immediate family knew what my thesis was about. My mother had asked once when I told her the title, "Is that going to pay anything?" she had said. And I had explained briefly, and she had changed the subject to Caleb's newest business idea. I didn't know yet what my family had been doing while I was building that thesis. I was about to find out, and the folder on my phone was about to become a document. To understand what that handshake meant, you need to understand what the previous 6 years looked like. I completed a Master of Public Policy with a concentration in urban infrastructure and veteran services. My GPA was 3.94. The program is ranked 7th nationally in its field. My thesis was 214 pages, filed November 3rd, and its title was Closing the Gap, a county-level framework for transitional housing allocation among post-9/11 veterans in non-metropolitan regions. I am telling you this not to impress you, but because my family routinely introduced me as Maya, our daughter who's been in school forever, and I need you to hold both of those facts in your head at the same time. While finishing this degree, I was working as a part-time policy researcher for a nonprofit called the Central Valley Veterans Coalition. I earned $28,400 a year. Out of that, I sent $600 a month home. Every month, for 31 consecutive months, because my mother told me the family needed it. 31 months, times $600. $18,600. I want to be precise about that number because it is going to matter later. I was the person my family called when something broke, not just physically, but in every sense. When there was a bill they couldn't parse, they called Maya. When there was a form that needed filling, they called Maya. When there was a fight between my mother and my aunt that had curdled into a 2-week silence, they called Maya. I was the load-bearing wall, and like most load-bearing walls, I was not visible from the front of the house. You only notice a load-bearing wall when someone tries to remove it. I want to stop here for just a second, because if you've made it this far, there's a decent chance you recognize this role. You were the dependable one. You were the person whose name only got called when something needed fixing. You got the 3 a.m. texts, but not the birthday posts. You were introduced to people as still figuring it out, or taking a little longer, or finding her path. And none of those people knew that while you were finding your path, you were also paying someone else's light bill and driving someone else's kid to their orthodontist appointment and handling someone else's expired registration, because if you didn't do it, it simply would not get done. I know that person. I was that person. And I want you to know that what I'm about to describe is not a story about being exceptional. It is a story about finally stopping. There are 3 specific incidents from my history with this family that I need you to understand, because without them, what happens at the graduation means nothing. 6 years before the ceremony, I was accepted to 2 graduate programs. The first was the state program partial scholarship, close to home, manageable. The second was a private university in Boston, full scholarship, $94,000 in tuition, waived entirely. It was, by any objective measure, the better opportunity. When I told my mother about the Boston program, she said, "If you move to Boston, don't expect us to be here when you come back." Not a question, not a concern, a condition. I chose the state program. I told no one about the Boston acceptance. I found the letter a year before graduation while clearing out a storage box, crisp, official, still in its original envelope. I photographed it. I added it to the folder. 3 years before the ceremony, my brother Caleb needed a car for a new job. My mother called it a family emergency. I sent $2,200 from my savings, because that is what you do in an emergency, and I believed her when she said it was one. Caleb quit the job 6 weeks later. The car became primarily my mother's car. I found this out because Caleb tagged her in a Facebook photo, a road trip, a resort casino 3 hours away, both of them laughing in the parking lot. And the caption said, "Little getaway." The transfer timestamp on my bank record was clearly visible to me when I looked at it later. No one mentioned repayment. No one has, as of the day I'm telling you this story. 4 months before graduation, I told my family I would be receiving recognition at the commencement ceremony and invited them to attend. My mother's response: "Your cousin Dara is also graduating that weekend, so we might have to split up." Dara was completing a certificate program at a community college. My mother chose Dara's ceremony. The whole family chose Dara's ceremony. Then, 2 weeks before my graduation, Dara's ceremony was rescheduled. So they came to mine. Not because they wanted to, not because they had decided I deserved it, because they had nowhere else to be. I am not telling you this to generate sympathy. I am telling you this because it is the exact context you need in order to understand why, when I began auditing my own family's finances, I was not surprised by what I found. I was only confirmed. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to stop hoping I was wrong. 2 months before graduation, I was sitting at my desk, a second-hand Bria setup in a studio apartment. A lamp I bought at an estate sale, a legal pad with a grid I'd drawn myself, and I opened a new spreadsheet. I wasn't angry. I want to be very clear about that. I was not sitting there seething, building a case out of spite. I was approaching the question the same way I approached policy briefs, with a research question, a data set, and a methodology. The research question was simple. Where exactly had my monthly contributions been going? I started with my own outflows, because that's where any honest audit begins, with yourself. Column A, date. Column B, recipient. Column C, amount. Column D, stated reason. Column E, actual outcome. The column E entries are where the story is. The monthly transfers totaled $18,600 across 31 months. That figure I already knew. Then I added the $2,200 for Caleb's car, the $1,340 I'd paid for my mother's dental emergency 19 months prior, the $487 for a flight home when there was a family crisis that turned out to be a conflict between my mother and her sister that resolved itself before I landed. The birthday and holiday gifts across 4 years, which I tracked through my bank statements, $1,217. Total documented outflow $23,844, sent over the course of 4 years, from a part-time researcher's salary, by someone who was simultaneously writing a 214-page thesis. Now column E. The first entry I traced was a $600 transfer. In a month, my mother had told me utilities were overdue. When I looked at her Venmo history, which was at that time still public, I found $880 in transfers to a bingo hall mobile app in the same 30-day window. The utilities, I later confirmed through a conversation with my aunt, had been paid by my aunt, not by my mother, 2 weeks before I sent the money. The second was a $400 transfer for groceries. 11 days later, Caleb posted an Instagram photo still public at the time. I found it of him and my mother at a resort casino, tagged with a small roulette emoji and the words "Little Getaway." The timing was not ambiguous. The third was a $180 transfer for Caleb's gas money for job interviews. By the time that transfer posted to his account, he had already left the job. His LinkedIn listed the end date as 2 weeks prior. I had not been told. The fourth was $200 for my mother's prescriptions. I flagged this as the one honest entry. It was. I want to be precise about this, because I am not building a false case. I checked. I cross-referenced. The prescription entry was legitimate. The rest was not. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, did you ever ask where the money was going? And the answer is yes, multiple times. And every time I asked, I was told I was being paranoid, ungrateful, suspicious. Every time I pushed back, I was reminded of everything the family had done for me. And because I had been trained from a very young age to doubt my own perceptions when they conflicted with my family's preferred narrative, I apologized. I dialed it back. I kept sending the money. The spreadsheet was the first time I had looked at the numbers without anyone there to talk me out of what I was seeing. And then I found something I wasn't looking for. I was cross-referencing an old address, my grandmother's house, which I was using as a reference point for a prior financial record, when a property search result came back that stopped me. The house had transferred to my mother's name 6 months ago. My grandmother, my mother's mother, a woman named Ruth, who had called me her steadiest girl, and pressed a folded $10 bill into my palm every birthday until the year she couldn't anymore, had passed away 9 months before my graduation. I had been told at the time that there was no estate to speak of. No assets, no savings. The house would go to the county because of debts. I had believed this. I had sent a sympathy card to my mother. I had not attended the funeral because I had a thesis defense 3 days later. And my mother had told me Nana Ruth would have wanted me to stay focused. I had stayed focused. I had defended. I had gotten the 3.94. The property record told a different story. And then, 2 weeks after I found the property record, a letter arrived at my apartment. It had been forwarded, redirected by the post office from an old address, opened slightly at one corner by the automated sorting machine. It was from an attorney named Marcus Delaney, a state attorney, Central Valley area. It referenced my grandmother's estate. It listed me as a secondary beneficiary. The amount designated for me, $8,000. I read it twice. I set it on my desk. I listened to my refrigerator hum for a while. Then, I photographed the letter. I added it to the folder. I opened a new tab on my laptop and began building a timeline. My phone rang. It was my mother. I watched it ring until it stopped. I took a screenshot of the missed call and added it to the folder. The folder count at the end of that session, 389 items. I sat in the dark for a while after I closed my laptop. Not in grief exactly, in confirmation. I had spent years wondering if I was being too sensitive, too suspicious, too demanding, if my sense that the scales were permanently tilted against me was a character flaw rather than an observation. The spreadsheet had answered that question. The property record had answered that question. The forwarded letter had answered that question. The answer was, I was right. I had always been right. And being right felt like nothing I had expected. There was no satisfaction in it. There was only a very quiet, very heavy clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives when you stop hoping the picture will change and finally look directly at the thing in front of you. I finished the spreadsheet at 1:47 a.m. I closed my laptop. I sat in the dark for a while. And then I thought, graduation is in 6 weeks. They're all going to be in the same room. So am I. So is the governor. That was when the arithmetic turned into a decision. I want to be clear about what that decision was and what it wasn't. Because I think the framing matters. I was not planning a public confrontation. I was not planning a scene. I was not planning to walk across a stage and weaponize my honor cord against my mother in front of 9,000 people. That would have required me to be a different kind of person than I am, and I have never been that kind of person. What I was planning was precision. And the difference between confrontation and precision is this: confrontation requires the other person to cooperate. Precision does not. I want to be clear about something. I didn't plan to humiliate anyone. I planned to stop protecting people from the consequences of things they had actually done. That is the line. That is the whole strategy, contained in one sentence. Over the 5 weeks between the discovery and the ceremony, I prepared in 4 stages. In the first week, I exported my bank statement data into the spreadsheet I had already built, organized by transaction category. Every transfer to a family member was highlighted in yellow. Every transfer that came with a specific stated reason was highlighted in orange. Every orange cell was cross-referenced with a column E entry showing actual outcome. When I printed the spreadsheet at standard font, it was 11 pages. I did not print it yet. In the second week, I contacted Marcus Delaney. I identified myself as a named beneficiary, provided my contact information, and requested a certified copy of my grandmother's estate filing. I was professional, I was brief, he was responsive. The documents arrived by certified mail 9 days later in a plain manila envelope. I labeled a physical folder by hand. I placed it in the slim black portfolio case I used for work. In the third week, I researched my legal options. Not because I planned to file anything at graduation, but because I believe in knowing the landscape before you enter a room. I learned that I had up to 3 years to file a claim against the estate, if I could establish intentional exclusion. I documented my research in a notes file. I did not discuss it with anyone. In weeks 4 and 5, I prepared 2 printed packets. One was for me. One was for someone else, a specific person I planned to hand it to at the ceremony, if and only if the moment arrived. I was not going to create the moment. I was only going to recognize it if it came. And then, 3 weeks before graduation, I had coffee with Dr. Ferreira. We met for a post-thesis debrief at a coffee shop near campus that she prefers because it has good acoustics and poor Wi-Fi, and therefore no one brings a laptop. I told her, not bitterly but matter-of-factly, that my family had nearly missed my graduation in order to attend my cousin's community college completion. I told it as a piece of information. She received it as a piece of information. She was quiet for a moment. She set her cup down. She said, "Maya, do you know what you're being awarded at the ceremony?" I told her I knew about the Chancellor's service recognition. She said, "There's something else. I wasn't supposed to tell you early, but the governor's office contacted the department. Your thesis has been cited in a working policy brief. He's going to acknowledge it publicly. By name. Your name. The program. And you." I looked at her. I said, "Okay." I said, "I've had practice." That night in my apartment, I made one rule for myself. I would not start anything. If my family showed up and behaved well, I would let the day be what it was. If they behaved badly, if they made a spectacle, if they repeated the pattern in front of witnesses, I would not do what I had always done, which was absorb it quietly and protect them from the consequences of their own behavior. I was done finishing things alone. The night before graduation, I placed both printed packets in the slim black portfolio case. I zipped it. I set it by the door. I went to sleep at 10:23 p.m. The folder was ready. My exit plan was ready. What I wasn't ready for was what my mother was going to say in that stadium mirror the next morning, which of course I've already told you. So now you know how I got there. The stadium held 14,000 people. That morning, 9,200 of them were there. The weather was 68 degrees and overcast with a light wind that kept moving the hanging banners, which were printed in the university's colors, a blue so specific it looks navy in photographs and cerulean in person. The governor's seal was on the podium. I noticed it during the processional when I scanned the stage, which I did the way I scan any environment I'm about to operate in. Methodically left to right, noting the exits and the power positions. My family was in Section C, row 14. I knew this because I had confirmed their seat assignments 3 days prior when I requested the printed program. From my position in the third row of graduates, I could see them without turning my head. I did not turn my head. But before any of that, before the processional, before the stage, before Dr. Ferreira's knowing smile from the faculty section, there was the lobby. There's always the lobby. My mother found me 20 minutes before the processional began. Extended family was there, 3 aunts, 2 cousins and Patricia, a family friend who has known me since I was 7 years old, and who once told me, during a holiday dinner when I was 14, that I was going to do something that mattered. I had held on to that sentence for a long time. My mother was wearing a blazer I had never seen before. It was fitted, well made, the kind of thing you buy specifically to be seen in. She was animated. She was performing the role of proud mother with the fluency of someone who had practiced it in the mirror, warmth in the gestures, volume calibrated for the surrounding audience. She found me near the check-in table and began introducing me to the family members around her. "This is my daughter Maya. She's the one who's been taking forever to finish school." I said nothing. Patricia said, "Taking forever? She just got her master's degree." My mother waved it off. "You know what I mean. Caleb would have been done faster." She said this with a small laugh, the kind designed to signal that it was a joke. Caleb, who was standing nearby looking at his phone, does not have a college degree. He has never enrolled. My mother has introduced him as the entrepreneur of the family at multiple dinner tables while I was present. Then she stepped toward the mirror near the lobby entrance. She adjusted her blazer. She looked at her own reflection and, without looking at mine, said, "Try not to embarrass us more than you already have." I counted them. Then I turned and walked back to the staging area. I didn't respond. I had already said everything I needed to say. It just hadn't been delivered yet. The processional began. The dean spoke. A faculty member spoke. The student speaker spoke with the particular energy of someone who had memorized 30 minutes of material and needed everyone to know it. The crowd was warm and patient. And then the governor was introduced. The audience responded with the kind of applause that belongs to someone people are genuinely glad to see, not polite applause, not performative applause, but the real kind, the kind that means, "We were hoping you'd be here." He is known in this state primarily for his Veterans Housing Initiative. He stepped to the podium with the ease of someone who has been in large rooms so many times that large rooms no longer register as large. He spoke about the university, he spoke about the graduates, and then he said that the state's new transitional housing allocation model to be piloted in 4 counties beginning the following fiscal year had been developed in part through academic research that the State Policy Office had formally incorporated into its working framework. I watched my mother in Section C, row 14. She was looking at her phone. The governor paused. He said he wanted to acknowledge a specific individual whose thesis work had been integrated into the state's housing policy brief. A graduating master's student who had also been conducting on-the-ground coordination with 12 veterans' families in the Central Valley while completing her degree. He said, "My name." I watched my mother lower her phone. I watched her look at the stage. I watched her face do something I had never seen it do before. In 24 years of watching it, I could not name the expression from 40 yards away. But it was not pride exactly. It was closer to the particular expression of someone doing rapid arithmetic on a sum that does not resolve the way they expected. He said my name a second time as I approached the stage. He held my hand slightly longer than a standard handshake. He leaned in and said quietly enough that only I and the photographer could hear, "The framework is being implemented in Fresno County first. You should know that." I didn't look at Section C, row 14. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. It just hadn't been heard yet. The family gathered in the campus courtyard after the ceremony. There was a catering table with mini sandwiches and sparkling water and a banner that said, "Congratulations, class of and the year." My mother approached me with a new energy, one I recognized the shape of even though I hadn't seen it in some time. It was the energy of someone who has been caught mid-calculation and is now trying to get ahead of the math. She said, "I didn't know you were getting that kind of award." I said, "I know." She said, "You should have told us." I said, "I did, in March. I also sent you the program booklet PDF. I also told you the name of the award in a voicemail on March 14th. I have the transcript." Silence. My aunts were nearby. Patricia was nearby. Caleb had put his phone in his pocket. I opened the slim black portfolio case. I removed one of the 2 printed packets. I did not hand it to her. I set it on the table between us. I smoothed it once with my palm, the way you smooth a document before presenting it in a meeting. I stepped back. I said, "This is a summary of my financial contributions to this family over the past 31 months. It's also a copy of Nana Ruth's estate filing, which includes my name as a secondary beneficiary for $8,000. I found out through a letter that was accidentally forwarded to my apartment. No one called me." My mother looked at the packet on the table. She did not pick it up. I said, "I'm not asking for an apology right now. I'm giving you the information. What you do with it is up to you." Then I said 3 numbers. $23,844. That's what I've sent home since starting this program. Pause. $8,000. That's what I was left in Nana Ruth's estate. That I didn't know about. Pause. 389. That's how many items are in the folder on my phone, documenting the last 2 years. My voice was level the entire time. I was not performing level, I was level. There is a difference, and it is the difference between theater and infrastructure. My mother had gone very still, not the stillness of shock. The stillness of calculation. The aunts had stopped making eye contact with each other. Caleb was looking at his shoes. And then Patricia, family friend, 53 years old, who has known me since I was 7, and once told me I was going to do something that mattered, took one step toward me and put her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything, she just stood beside me. The packet was on the table. The numbers were in the air. And we were all waiting to see what my mother would do with the truth. Here's how it's settled. Because I know you want to know. 2 days after the graduation ceremony, attorney Marcus Delaney contacted my mother directly. Not at my instigation. He contacted her because the estate filing process legally required him to confirm beneficiary acknowledgement, a procedural requirement under the state's estate settlement statute that had not been fulfilled in the required time frame. He was not aggressive. He was procedural. He used statutory language, not accusatory language. He explained that a named secondary beneficiary had not received formal notification, that the estate distribution had occurred without the required confirmation of beneficiary acknowledgement, and that the matter would need to be reviewed for compliance. He used no dramatic language. He used the language of someone who processes these situations with the same energy he uses to process everything else, methodically, legally, without particular emotion about the outcome. My mother told me later, through a text I did not respond to, that it was the most uncomfortable phone call of her life. That is the most politely devastating thing I have ever heard. She called me 4 times in the 45 minutes after she got off the phone with Marcus Delaney. I did not answer. She texted, "This is not what it looks like." Then, "Call me." Then, "You're tearing this family apart." The count went to 392. I did not respond. That evening I drove home. I stopped at a diner I like. A small place with terrible overhead, lighting and very good rye toast. And I ordered what I always order there. Eggs over easy, rye toast, black coffee. I sat in a corner booth and I ate my dinner without looking at my phone and without reviewing any document in any folder. Then I called Dr. Ferreira. She picked up on the second ring. I told her thank you. She asked how I was doing. I thought about it honestly for a real moment and I said, like someone who finally handed back a weight they'd been carrying so long they forgot it wasn't theirs. Fresno County is going to need that framework in 6 months. There was no grand apology, there never is. But there was a certified letter from an estate attorney. And sometimes that's enough. Let me tell you where everyone ended up. 6 weeks after graduation, I accepted a full-time position as a policy analyst with the state's Department of Housing and Community Development. $74,800 a year. I moved 2 hours away. I stopped sending the $600 a month. No one asked me to explain why. That was its own kind of answer. The estate claim is ongoing. Marcus Delaney is handling it. I check in with him quarterly. I have the certified copy. I have the timeline. I have 392 items in a folder on my phone and an 11-page spreadsheet that has never needed to be revised because numbers don't revise themselves. My mother made contact 3 more times in the 6 weeks after graduation. twice by phone, once through Caleb, who sent me a text saying she wanted to talk and that he thought I should hear her out. I told Caleb I appreciated him passing that along. I did not call her. I responded once briefly, in writing to clarify that I was not estranged. I was simply no longer available to be used. The distinction matters to me. Caleb separately sent me a text 3 weeks after the ceremony. It said, quote, "She was wrong to say that at graduation for what it's worth." Unquote. I thanked him. It was the first time in my memory that he had said something like that. I don't know yet what to do with it. I am holding it loosely. Patricia and I have coffee every 3 weeks at the same place she suggested. She told me recently that she had always thought I was the most capable person in the family, but had never known how to say it without making things worse. I told her I appreciated her saying it now. She said she was sorry it had taken this long. I told her it was fine. I meant it. Dr. Ferreira wrote me a letter of recommendation for the state position. She described me as among the most structurally rigorous and humanely motivated policy thinkers she had advised in 18 years. I printed it and put it in a frame on my desk, not for display, for the bad days. So far, there have been fewer bad days than I expected. Here is the only lesson I will leave you with. There's a version of this story where I spend the rest of my life waiting for my mother to understand what she had in me. I chose a different version. I chose to be findable by the people who were looking for exactly what I had built. That is the whole thing. That is the whole lesson, contained in 2 sentences. The week after I moved into my new apartment, I ordered furniture. Real furniture, not secondhand. I have a desk lamp that I chose specifically because I like the color of the light it casts. On Sunday mornings, I make coffee the way I like it, a little too strong in a mug I bought at a farmer's market, and I read policy briefs at my kitchen table while the city outside does what it does. It is a very ordinary Sunday morning. It is the best ordinary morning I have ever had. Dr. Ferreira calls me on Thursdays. We talk for 20 minutes. She asks about the Fresno County implementation timeline. I tell her where we are. She says every single time, "Good, keep going." I keep going. And I carry, still, the slim black portfolio case, not because it contains anything I need right now, but because I learned something in those 11 months of building the folder, something I did not know before. Documentation is not a weapon. It is a record of reality. And the most powerful thing you can do, when someone spends years trying to make you doubt your own perceptions, is simply write down what actually happened. If you've been carrying something that was never yours to carry, you're allowed to set it down. Not in anger. Not in performance. Just quietly, like a folder on a table, and walk away. I want to ask you 2 things before you go. First, have you ever been the dependable one in your family, the person everyone calls but nobody sees? Tell me what that looked like for you. I read every comment. And second, what would you have done with that folder? I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.